I'm Annie Murphy. I'm the director here at the Framingham History Center, and welcome everybody. This is a great turnout. We also have an e-news, and if you gave us your email and you haven't already gotten on the list, we often will give you the information about the Framingham Access, because they are great about coming and doing all our shows, filming all our shows, and we have some wonderful programs. So they film them over and over again. We have come into a treasure trove of Dennison archives and items, and we are just getting started going through it all. And Dana Ricciardi, our curator, will tell you more about how that came to be. But I just wanted to make a pitch for the Framingham History Center, because I really don't think that many towns, history centers, historical societies, whatever, could handle such an influx of archives and materials as we have been able to do. And it really is not only thanks to our part-time curator, Dana Ricciardi, but an amazing array of volunteers, all of whom you will hear from, many of them you will hear from tonight. So this is a pitch to let you all know that the History Center is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We do have, I'm the full-time staff person here. We have Charlene Frary, who's a part-time staff person and a realtor in town, as well as Dana. And, but really the volunteers are what make this organization as special as it is. Can we have a few board members in our midst tonight? We have Jennifer Tote, we have Jim Parr. Any other board members that I'm missing? Oh, sorry, Kevin. Kevin Swope. And so they are also premier volunteers for the organization. So anyway, I will welcome you all and turn it over to Dana. And if you can't hear, would you please let us know? These roundtables are really meant to be very informal. We want to hear from you. We really just want to give you a sneak peek at some of the items that we've already discovered. There's so much more, and if you want to get involved and you want to volunteer, let us know, and you can be a part of this exciting discovery too.
Thank you, Annie. And thank you all for coming. I'm sure a lot of you have wonderful memories of Dennison that we have no idea about until we hear from you, and we'd like to give you a chance to do that. I would like to start by saying that this evening's program came about because of a chance meeting between a 30-year employee of Dennison and later Avery-Dennison, Paula Boulette, and a 30-year volunteer at the Framingham History Center, Mary Gallagher. They met at a barbecue, got into conversation, and it turned out that Paula Boulette had a chance to go out to California to the headquarters of Avery, and while she was there, she was taken to their archives, and she saw all the old Dennison archives, which she had helped to pack up years before, and she said, "What are your plans for all these things?" And she was told, "Well, we're probably finished with them, and I imagine we'll just throw out what's left." And she said, "Oh no, those papers and records should be in Framingham." So one thing led to another, and pretty soon they were on a truck and they came back to Framingham. And they sat in the warehouse there for 3 years until she met Mary Gallagher. And Mary said, "Oh well, why don't you telephone Dana Ricciardi?" And so that was how this all started. And then we had this wonderful group of volunteers that got involved. And I also want to say that we have been treated like guests or royalty. The staff at Avery-Dennison has been so good to us. And I want to especially thank Fred Bastian, who is the fellow that opens up every time we go down there, locks up after us, and has helped us with all sorts of little things. And we want to hear from him for a few minutes. The things up here are a little bit small and hard to see. We just brought a small selection, but I want to start out by asking if anyone knows what is significant about the date February 27th, 1896. Anyone want to guess?
Is this a trick question?
No, it's pretty straightforward. You're very, very close, yes.
She's not a player.
No. So this was one of our finds. It is a handwritten letter from the Dennison Manufacturing, to the Dennison Manufacturing Company. It says, "Gentlemen, I accept your offer of this date to sell you the Framingham property for $70,000 cash, except the piece of land south of the Boston and Albany Railroad. Yours truly, Albert A. Pope." And that's it. The deal was done. Try building a building nowadays. I'd like to give each of the volunteers that worked with us a chance to talk about, to pick one object on the table to start with, and then we hope you'll join in.
Hello, my name is Fred Bastion. I've been with Dennison for many years, and when they tell me to clean out the building, you know, they say throw it away, but I take it and I keep it for myself. You know? And there's one, I think it's pretty good. It's a negative of the Dennison, and I think it's pretty cool, and that's why I kept it. And I'll show it to you when I go back to the table. I'll open it up and show you. And that's it. There it is right there.
So you just found that, like,
Yeah, when they tell me to throw away stuff, I just, you know, I just keep it for myself instead of throwing it away. It might be worth, you know, something someday or whatever.
Yes, can I just say, we actually found the photograph, the print that was made that goes with this glad day, last night you did the same view. So we're thrilled to have this. Thank you, Fred.
Did you
Thank
work
you.
there before it was owned by Avery?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
When did they want you to throw that negative away?
When they started, doing moving machinery out of the building and stuff, different buildings, and when they say go in and clean it, you just go in and clean it. And
So the
that's
company
how.
was still Dennison at the time, Avery-Dennison?
Yeah, no, it was the Dennison at the time. Mhm. And this here from the Dennison when I think 1900s, I think, when they had their fire brigade, and these here are clay nozzles, what they used when they used to have fires at the Dennison, and this is the only one what's left because all the other ones are like they fell apart, and everything. And this is the only, and this one here was redone. It was.
is that in your collection, Fred?
Yeah, it is. And when I was on the fire department, they issued these to all of us. It's a Dennison patch to let people know you're on the fire department. When the guards used to stop you at night, if the whistle goes off at night, you have to get up like 4 in the morning, go to work, and this here lets the guards know you're on the fire department.
Was that a strictly internal fire department, strictly for Dennison?
Yeah, Dennison only, yeah. Mhm.
Fred, did you have that restored yourself?
No, somebody did it because when I found it, when I started cleaning out, this was redone, and all the other ones weren't redone. They were all broken. and that's the only good one what's left.
So would that be near a fire extinguisher or?
This here would be hooked up to a hose. If there was a bad fire, they would hook this up to a hose, and you have to hold it. You know, other people would be in back here when
You
they're
ever
using
fight
it.
a fire while you were?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Is this strictly a volunteer?
Yes. Volunteer fire department. Mhm. Yes.
That whistle, if I remember correctly, also used to go off for flood, did it not?
Yes. Yeah,
I know
for
there
floods.
was
Yeah.
a separate whistle for the flooding as
Mhm.
opposed to the fire.
Yep.
I thought there was, but I couldn't remember which way it went.
Right.
Two or something?
Hmm?
Was it one whistle fire, two whistle flood, or something like that?
They used to have codes
Okay.
for like maybe 2 or 3 would be probably a flood, and another one would be constant as a fire, constant whistle.
What would be flooding, I mean,
After a rain.
after rain?
Yeah. Some of the buildings years ago they used to flood, and we used to go down there with wet vacs, and we used to vacuum up all the water because you have tow motors going through, moving rolls around, so you can't get the rolls away.
How many years have you worked at Dennison?
33 years.
Wow.
19. I started 1979.
And you're moving, they're closing out all the buildings, and you said August 1st?
August,
All the warehouse?
sometime in August, Dennison ain't going to be in Framingham anymore.
Right, that's sort of a big day, that there's going to be nothing left that's
Right.
Where's it going?
I think Southborough,
moved, yes.
some industrial park. All the people want a new efficient building because, it's old buildings and everybody complains it's too cold in one area, it's too hot in another. So that's what they want.
What will happen to all those buildings?
They're sold. They're sold to Smock.
All of the warehouses too?
The ones in Framingham.
The warehouses?
Oh, well, 16 and 17, they're not sold. In 19, they're not sold yet. They're trying to sell them before they move. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
There were a tremendous number of interesting finds. And Pat, would you like to choose something to talk about? Because Pat Levin and Susan Silva have put in the greatest number of hours. They've been there at least once a week ever since July.
Well, one of the early finds that we had, and Dana was the person that found these, an archaeological find, and they are Babylonian tags. Dennison thought they were first in developing tags at the time of the Civil War, but these are about 3,000 years old, and they're clay, circular, flat tablets called tags, and some were used to identify different things that were being sold. So they were inscribed, and then they were turned sometimes with another type of an inscription, so they could only be used by the particular person, like their label. And one square one, and I believe it could be this one, I know these are hard to see, was used to identify a basket. And at first we had difficulty figuring out exactly what these tablets were. And then one day when we were looking through Round Robin, which was a publication for the people that worked in the factory. It was a monthly publication, and it had different facts about what was going on in the factory, varieties of pictures, health issues, safety. And this particular one is 1923. And in 1923, King Tut's tomb was opened. These particular things were in the same booklet that at the same time that King Tut's tomb was open. I'm going to give you this for a minute so I could get the page. And when opening this particular book, there was a whole page. It's hard to see. This whole page described 9 of these little artifacts that we found. There were 2 missing, which Susan and I have been on quite a hunt to try to see if we can find them, but we've had no luck. But interesting enough, it explains each of the stones that we found. And then I turned back to another page, and I found that after the tomb is discovered in February, by March, Dennison has put out a crepe paper that's got pharaohs on it, because everything was so much into Egypt at that particular time that they wanted to have a line of some kinds of goods that would celebrate that find. So it only took them 2 months to get this on the market, from February, well, not even, a month and a half or so. So I turned back a couple of pages, and now I see a costume made out of crepe paper. It's King Tut. It's a lady with a King Tut costume. So, you know, that was a wonderful find, and we're still trying to discover more. But tonight, when I came in, I was talking to Kevin for a minute, and Kevin has something to add to this find that is new to everyone, including all of us that have been trying to study this particular object. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, it was just a coincidence because I told Dana, she said, well, why don't you find something to talk about? I said, oh, I'll come in an hour early and just go through the boxes down in the basement and find something. So I did. And I'm going to talk about the history room in general. But one of the things that happened to be in the file once I heard Pat was talking about it, I said, oh, you know where they bought those Babylonian tags from? She said, no, you had no idea. But there was correspondence. It was a collector in Florida, sent them up to Henry-Dennison, basically said, you know, you say you have the earliest tags, but I have these Babylonian tags. And so Dennison said, well, how much do you want for them? He said, $50. So they were bought for $50 by Henry-Dennison and put in the history room. So, yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history room. One of the reasons we have all this stuff is because Dennison probably because of our family company, but they were always very interested in their own history. It had always been members of the family who'd run it. Started up in Brunswick, Maine in the 1840s. I don't remember what year. Do you remember? 1844. And so they always kept everything. They kept personal correspondence with the family, and it was kept in files sort of scattered around the buildings. But in 1920, they decided they really wanted to organize a history room and hire a professional historian full-time to organize and run the history room. And one of the objects I have up here is a photo of the history room, and you'll be able to come up and look at it after I talk. But there was a special room in there, and they kept all the files from all the departments. And there was a full-time historian who wrote history of the company year by year. It's 5,000 pages altogether. And they also would write reports on different subjects. If anybody said, well, when did we start the Christmas line? They have a full report about when it started, when they started doing different processes, the history of everything, the history of marketing. They had scrapbooks with every advertisement they ever ran, and they were with a copy of the ad, and it was annotated with what publication it ran in and when. It was unbelievable detail. And at one point, they had 3 full-time employees working in the history rooms to prepare reports and just keep track of the history of the company. And it's amazing. One of the things that professional historians talk about, one of the areas that's sort of the least well documented is commercial history, because the companies are basically interested in making money, and when they stop making money, they don't care anymore. And it's amazing, having done a book about the Saxonville Mills. The Saxonville Mills or Roxbury Carpet did a 100-year history of the company in 1959, we're marking 100 year, and I read it, and half the things they say in it are not quite correct or completely wrong, but so companies often don't have a sense of their own history. But Dennison certainly did, and Avery not so much, obviously, because once they shipped it out there, they were going to throw it all out. So it's thankful that somebody who actually was interested in this happened to be working as the facilities manager here, because otherwise all this stuff would have been lost forever. So I'm going to turn it over. Who should we do next? Nancy, since you're standing closest to me. Nancy Prince.
Thank you.
Well, I'm Nancy Prince, and sometimes I feel like I was found in the archives because I was born on Dennison Avenue in Framingham in a house that was originally built for the senior managers when they moved to Framingham. So the house was built in 1895, 1896, and that's when Dennison Avenue was created. My father began at Dennison in 1933. He met my mother there in the late 40s. And my sister Cheryl, who's here, and I and some of our siblings also worked at Dennison. I don't live in Framingham now, but I have a great affinity for Framingham and Dennison Manufacturing Company. So I had the opportunity to come in sort of at the third pass after people had gone through a lot of boxes with all these beautiful things. And I was going through reports, and these were, I was particularly interested in reports from the 1930s, from the office and warehouse division, and in going through these, innocuous-looking reports, I learned some very interesting pieces of trivia that relate to social history and also some personal history. So I'm just going to quickly read a couple of excerpts that come from sort of reports only about an inch high that had some amazing things to learn something more about. Some of it is kind of positive, some of it's quite positive, some might be, to me as a woman in business, is a little interesting. So now we're in, this is a report to the Board of Directors in 1933, talking a little bit about all the cost reduction that they've gone through because of the Depression, and that they've cleaned up some dead wood and gotten rid of some things that they probably should have gotten rid of before. And I quote, "But we must get high-class help. We must be building youngsters for the future, and we must hold our best-trained executives if we are to march back up the hill in proper form. Our men are looked up to, our methods are praised, and our production marveled at. We have some good men, but we need some more." And I'll pick that thread up in a second. Also talking about the expense reduction. As in the office, constant hammering at expense, installation of rates, putting girls on men's jobs, and the like have all tended toward tremendous slashes in expenses, and goes through a couple of examples where they have cut the labor cost of clerical work by 2/3. This tremendous drop on top of a decrease in number of orders is largely due to removal of men carried over from the old days and replacement of girls on measured production. And at the time, they were finding ways of measuring production activity of tasks that previously were not measured. Things in the factory might be, but not necessarily clerical work. He talks about machinery. No, people first. Okay, so here was my wonderful personal find. March 1st, 1934, Board of Directors report. "We have also added a few of the better type youngsters, all graduates of the Harvard School of Business Administration, to which they came from many sources, including Dartmouth, Bowdoin, Brown, etc." And my father was one of those men, and they actually mentioned him later in a positive way. So that was like amazing for me to see something personal that my father would never have seen those words. Goes on to talk about new machinery, punch hole card extensions. Each year, the International Business Machine Company comes a step nearer to approaching this goal of being able to use punch cards to automatically update your inventory records, pack and file records, pricing, billing, posting, and statistical information. This is 1934. Probably the most important problem in the office now is machine reorganization. At the present time, sales, statistics, cost of goods, etc., are being done on IBM machinery. Next to machine, this is very in cooperation with the International Business Corporation in 1938, we are demonstrating the capabilities of the new IBM experimental machine. There were 5 sets to be placed experimentally throughout the United States, and we secured 1 set for experimental work. IBM have adapted their electronic typewriter to cable operation. That is, 1 machine at each end of a cable transmits written messages just as does the teletype. We understand that they may eventually market a wireless set. Just let our imagination run wild for a moment. A wireless set, 1 typewriter in a salesman's car in Denver, Colorado. Our salesman calls on a customer who asks him questions of delivery or whatnot, which he cannot answer until he communicates with Framingham. He steps out of his car and types a message, which we instantly receive here. We get the information for him and send it back to his typewriter in his car. Later, he transmits an order to Framingham by the same means. This is not too much to expect when IBM has gone as far as they have. Just how many uses we could find for this machine when perfected and placed on the market is hard to contemplate. Our experience so far with the cable machine has been excellent.
Cable machine.
So now I'm curious about IBM's history in 1938 and who were those other companies. And I mean, I didn't know that they had punch cards for certain types of activities and back in the 1930s. So I did do a mini bit of research on that. But anyway, and this is just from reading about 30 pages of what looked like not a very interesting report, but it was, and it is. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Dawn Buckley, and I was the packer. They made all these wonderful discoveries, and somebody had to pack them. So I packed them, and having worked on one of the major collections over at the History Center, probably for a year and a half before this, I was determined that these would be somewhat organized as I packed them. So each of the probably 60 boxes, would you say, has an inventory inside as well as some notation on the outside. Well, it's not a perfect system. I'm hoping that the stuff down there is accessible and people can find what they're looking for in a modest amount of time. But in the packing process, I did find some rather humorous things. And my favorite letter was a letter sent, I think it was World War II, sent to the War Department with a suggestion for using Dennison's crepe paper to make confetti bombs. So when your airplane was being chased by the enemy, you could let a confetti bomb go, and it would obscure his vision as he was flying. I don't think you'll read about those in history books because we got a very polite letter back saying, thank you for the suggestion, but we won't take you up on it now. It was very, very interesting. And they were always looking for suggestions and these whole files of stuff on suggested uses of products and new products.
However, as a follow-up, the largest order Dennison had ever had was for crepe paper parachutes that
Yes.
were not necessarily used for the obscure, but they would show up on whatever was the radar or the equivalent of radar. And because my dad was involved with that at the time, and he talked about how they would go to the top of the building at Dennison, and they were experimenting with different weights and different parachutes, and they did produce millions of these miniature parachutes that did indeed get dropped and would totally mess up whatever it was we were looking at. And I know there's
They did have a huge line of war products and things that they were pushing. So there you go. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Susan Silva, and along with all of the internal information that we found for Dennison, so many things, we did find a lot of personal things. And this was a suggestion to the Dennison Company by a 12-year-old girl.